What if everything you thought you knew about Hollywood was just the surface? A recently uncovered timeline suggests that Diddy and Jamie Foxx weren't just friends, they were bound by a hidden agreement that spanned decades. Private deals, coded parties, and career-saving moves. Once you hear this, you won't be able to unhear it. The room smelled of stale cigars, soundproofed walls lined with platinum records and dim red lighting giving it a moody glow. It was late one night in 2002 when Jamie Foxx walked into Daddy's house recording studio in Midtown Manhattan. At the time, Jamie was still fighting to establish himself in the music world. Though his acting career had earned him critical praise, his R&B ambitions had always been quietly dismissed. Until that night. Diddy, ever the orchestrator, had booked out the entire studio for a closed-door session, but no producer or songwriter was listed on the schedule. Fox wasn't even told what the meeting was about. All he knew was that one of the biggest moguls in the game had personally requested his presence. A courtesy call? A business proposition? Jamie didn't ask. He showed up. The two men greeted each other with a hug that masked a tension not yet spoken. Diddy poured drinks, neat. No chasers. The walls of the lounge seemed to press in as they talked, though what was said that night remains officially undocumented. But according to two separate former bodyguards who later spoke under anonymity, what occurred was far from ordinary. You could tell it wasn't about beats or features, one of the bodyguards said years later in a hushed podcast episode that quickly vanished from streaming platforms. There was a weight in the air. Like something was being buried right in front of us, and nobody had a shovel. Sources close to the situation say that Diddy brought up a situation Jamie had once witnessed, a private party gone sideways, back in the late 90s. Something that, if ever spoken aloud, could ruin more than careers. The details of what Jamie saw have never been fully revealed, but whatever it was, it had the power to burn bridges and sink empires. And Diddy, always the chess player, decided to flip the liability into loyalty. He made Jamie a proposition. Help me keep this buried, and I'll help you rise. Fox, initially hesitant, reportedly asked what kind of help Diddy could actually offer. That's when the conversation shifted. Diddy outlined a path to musical legitimacy, connections with top-tier producers, priority radio play, even ghostwriting help if needed. He would call in favors that most artists never even knew were on the table. In return, Jamie had to remain silent, not just about what he saw, but about the pact they were about to enter. No paperwork was signed. No lawyers present. Just a shared understanding, sealed over cognac and half-lies. That night, the verbal agreement was forged. Jamie, according to insiders, was told simply, "This is bigger than music." Months later, small breadcrumbs began to surface. Jamie dropped subtle lines in interviews about trusting the right people at the right time and conversations that change your whole direction. Fans brushed them off as spiritual soundbites. But those who were there that night knew better. The bodyguards who were posted outside the lounge recall being told to hand over their phones at the door. One recalled seeing a man walk into the studio carrying a black leather folio and walking out without it. Another remembered hearing one phrase repeated more than once from behind the closed doors: "We protect the circle." That phrase would appear again, years later, but the first time it was uttered was in that smoky studio lounge in 2002. By the end of the night, Jamie left the studio not with a contract, but with a promise. A dangerous promise. When he returned home, he didn't tell anyone, not even his closest friends, what had really happened. He simply said, "Things are about to change." And they did. Within months, Jamie began working with high-profile producers. Beats that would have cost an unsigned artist $100,000 were suddenly offered for free. Collaborations that had once seemed impossible were now being arranged quietly. The industry began to treat him differently, like someone who had been brought inside. The whispers started not long after. People in Jamie's circle noticed how tight-lipped he became when Diddy's name came up. One producer mentioned a time Jamie walked out of a room when someone joked about one of Diddy's parties. Another insider recalls Jamie taking a call, then canceling a planned collab with another artist, no reason given. The night of the studio meeting faded from the public eye, but not from the memories of those who witnessed it. The verbal pact, however ephemeral, would go on to dictate moves in both men's careers for years to come. It was the first stitch in a fabric of secrets, bound not by paper, but by survival. Years later, interviewers would occasionally bring up the idea of Jamie having a guardian angel in the industry. He'd smile, deflect, maybe crack a joke. But behind the laugh was a truth that had never been put on record. And in the vaults of Daddy's house studio, security footage from that night, like the event itself, was erased by morning. In the spring of 2005, just as Jamie Foxx was riding the momentum of his Academy Award win for Ray, he received a discreet message through a mutual associate. Come to Malibu. Bring no one. There was no address, just a date and a pickup location. The sender? Diddy. On a bright Friday afternoon, a private jet chartered under a corporate shell picked Jamie up from Van Nuys Airport. The manifest listed aliases. No press knew where he was going, because they weren't supposed to. The jet touched down at an executive airstrip in Santa Monica, where an unmarked black SUV awaited him on the tarmac. No logos, no cameras, just tinted windows and a driver who never spoke. The vehicle drove up Pacific Coast Highway, eventually turning up a long, winding road guarded by a double-gated entry. At the top sat one of Diddy's lesser-known properties, a cliffside Malibu mansion, away from his usual party scene and heavily shielded from the public eye. That weekend, there were no social media updates. No party flyers. No photographers staked outside. It was what insiders later dubbed as Zero Record Weekend, a time when powerful people could gather without the burden of headlines or accountability. Jamie was told to leave his phone at the entrance. It was placed in a biometric safe that only Diddy's private security could access. The same rule applied to every guest that weekend, though guest might not be the right word. There were no more than 7 people reportedly present, and the guest list remains unconfirmed to this day. But one former staffer, who was hired through a luxury catering company and signed an NDA later rescinded in court, said something unusual. There were no assistants. No entourage. Just Jamie, Diddy, and a few men in tailored suits. The kind who don't ask for anything because they already own everything. That weekend, Jamie stayed in a private guest house detached from the main mansion. The path between the two buildings was lit by a strange series of low floodlights that flickered at timed intervals, almost like motion detectors. From his room, he could hear music drifting from the cliffs. Not the kind of music played at parties, ambient, experimental. Loops, whispers, pulses. By Saturday night, the beach below the mansion lit up with what neighbors would later describe as production-level lighting. Locals walking their dogs saw strange rigs set up along the sand, tripods, floodlights, even what appeared to be a boom crane. But there was no film crew. No permits. The setup vanished by dawn. One neighbor, a retired cinematographer named Martin Lowell, claimed to see 2 men, one clearly Jamie, walking barefoot across the sand with a briefcase between them. He reported the scene to local authorities after seeing police drones in the sky 2 days later, but his statement was buried in a flood of unrelated noise. According to that same weekend staffer, dinner on Saturday was conducted at a long rectangular table overlooking the ocean. No one spoke much. Jamie, she said, looked different, focused, serious. Diddy, in contrast, was jovial but sharp, occasionally slipping into quiet murmurs with one of the suited men. She recalled overhearing a sentence that stuck with her for years. Once we go through with this, there's no record. Not even a memory. After dinner, all external lights were turned off. Windows were blacked out. The only signs of life were faint blue glows from digital screens within. And then, silence. No music. No conversation. Just the sound of waves crashing below. By Sunday morning, Jamie was gone. No goodbyes. No footage. Nothing but faint tire tracks in the gravel. The mansion's private surveillance system, according to a security firm whistleblower in 2009, was mysteriously wiped clean that weekend. Not corrupted. Not malfunctioning. Manually deleted. Anomalies in the backup logs revealed a complete data purge initiated within hours of Jamie's departure. When pressed years later during a podcast interview, Jamie was asked if he ever partied at Diddy's Malibu place. His answer was short. I've been up there once. Beautiful view. That's all I'll say. But industry insiders who had worked with both men said the mood changed after that weekend. Jamie stopped collaborating with certain producers. He quietly cut ties with former musical mentors. And in interviews, when asked about his sudden confidence in recording Unpredictable, he always smiled and repeated the same line. You only need one room, one beat, and the right person to believe in you. The irony? Unpredictable was released just months later, backed by a wave of underground hype and mysterious insider support. Many believe the Malibu weekend wasn't about music at all, but something deeper. A solidification of the verbal pact born 3 years earlier in that Manhattan studio. This time, however, it wasn't sealed with a drink. It was cemented on camera, somewhere in the sands of a private beach, on footage that no longer exists. Or at least, that's what we're told. When Unpredictable dropped in late 2005, it didn't just perform well, it exploded. Critics called it Jamie Foxx's real arrival in the music industry, and fans praised his smooth vocals, confident production, and undeniable swagger. The album debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and climbed to number 1 within weeks. But behind the scenes, whispers of an invisible hand guiding his rise grew louder. Just days after the mysterious Malibu weekend, Jamie was suddenly everywhere. Beats from top producers like Timbaland and Just Blaze, producers notoriously selective with who they worked with, appeared on his desk with no request made. Radio DJs who had once passed on his earlier demos now had him on repeat rotation. Even late-night TV appearances, notoriously difficult for R&B acts without chart dominance, were being handed to him. It was too fast, too clean, too orchestrated. Behind it all, Diddy's presence was unspoken but undeniable. Multiple sources in the industry claimed that he made the right calls in all the right places: promoters, club owners, playlist curators, even Grammy board members. There were no invoices, no email trails. Just results. And the message was clear: Jamie was in now. The cost, however, began to show itself subtly, at first in Jamie's shifting inner circle. Old collaborators, particularly from his early comedy music days, found themselves edged out. One former producer, who asked not to be named, said Jamie cancelled a recording session last minute, citing new priorities. That producer never got a call back. "I didn't even recognize him anymore," he said. "He wasn't rude or cold. Just calculated. Like someone had drawn a blueprint and he was just following it line by line." By 2006, Jamie was being invited to exclusive, ultra-private events hosted by Diddy across the globe. Notoriously selective gatherings, often in places like Monte Carlo, Dubai, and Mykonos, where phones were confiscated at the door and NDAs were standard with entry. These weren't industry mixes. They were power consolidations. One such event, held in Dubai that summer, would mark a pivotal moment. Jamie arrived under the radar, listed on the flight manifest under a pseudonym. The venue was a penthouse above a luxury hotel, beyond VIP, staffed by private security not affiliated with the hotel. According to an anonymous party planner who later broke their silence, the guest list included tech executives, media moguls, foreign investors, and Diddy, of course, at the center. At the Dubai event, Jamie reportedly performed a short private set. But what shocked the few insiders present was what happened afterward. As the room dimmed and a translucent screen lowered, Jamie was invited to join a closed-door conversation in a side room. The planner claimed to hear a phrase repeated multiple times before the door shut. His earned his seat. No one saw Jamie again for the rest of the evening. Following the Dubai trip, a noticeable shift occurred in Jamie's public image. His interviews became more guarded, polished. He began using phrases eerily similar to Diddy's: "Move in silence," "protect the circle," and "loyalty over noise." He started investing in media ventures, launching a digital platform that appeared to be backed by anonymous capital. When asked how he funded it, he smiled and said, "Friends who believe in the long game." But the transformation also drew suspicion. Some journalists began questioning how quickly Fox had maneuvered through notoriously tough industry barriers. Awards, deals, endorsements, he checked every box, but it was as if someone had handed him a cheat code. And those who dared to press too hard often found themselves suddenly disinvited from press junkets, blacklisted from Fox's media appearances, or silenced altogether. One radio host shared anonymously, "I asked him off record about Diddy. Just said, 'You're tight like that.' He went quiet, real quiet. Then laughed. Not a normal laugh. Just said, 'Some relationships you don't speak on. You just honor them.'" By the end of 2006, Jamie had completed a full transition from entertainer to power player. But it wasn't just talent or timing. It was access. And that access had a price. The biggest clue came when insiders noticed who Jamie wasn't working with. Several artists he'd grown up admiring, even name-dropped in early interviews, never appeared on any features. Rappers who had reached out for collabs were left on red. Rumors began to swirl that Fox had been advised, by someone at the top, to cut ties with Unpredictability. "They needed him streamlined," said one music journalist. "No loose affiliations. No wildcards. They had a plan, and everyone outside the plan had to go." The "they," of course, was never named. But the implication lingered. Even Fox's public persona began to shift. His humor remained, but the unpredictability, the spontaneity that made him so beloved, was restrained. Calculated. Some say he had the look of a man who'd seen things he couldn't unsee. By the end of that year, Unpredictable had gone platinum. Diddy posted a vague congratulations online, no tags, no direct mention, just a black and white photo of a fox and the caption, "Loyalty wins. Every time." Jamie liked the post. Never commented. To most fans, Jamie Foxx had finally broken through as a musical heavyweight. But to those watching closely, the climb came with a gravity that pulled at the edges of his soul. There was something heavier than fame guiding his moves now. And whatever it was, he wasn't letting it go. Not yet. In 2010, Las Vegas was still in its renaissance, less about neon lights and casinos, more about private penthouses, hidden rooms, and underground deals. It was the kind of place where secrets weren't just protected, they were curated. And that year, Diddy hosted one of his most exclusive gatherings yet, a private celebrity poker tournament at the Palms, limited to just a handful of players whose net worths collectively exceeded $1 billion. Jamie Foxx arrived in the early evening, dressed down in sweats and a plain cap pulled low, entering through a staff elevator with no entourage. He didn't check in under his name. He didn't post anything on socials. This wasn't about publicity. It was business. The tournament was invite-only, and the buy-in? $500,000. Inside the private suite, located on the top floor of the Fantasy Tower, was a custom-built poker table surrounded by floor-to-ceiling blackout curtains. The entire floor was off-limits to hotel staff, with a temporary Wi-Fi jammer installed to block electronic eavesdropping. Guests passed through 2 layers of security and were required to hand over all electronics, even smartwatches. The attendees? A tech mogul who'd just sold a startup for $2 billion. A Saudi oil heir. A controversial Hollywood producer. And, at the center, orchestrating it all, Diddy. The night unfolded slowly. Chips were stacked, drinks were poured, and hands were played. But those close to the situation say the cards were just theater. The real game was happening behind the scenes. Jamie wasn't there for poker. After a few hours, Diddy signaled for a break. That's when the real conversation began, in a VIP suite connected to the main room. Surveillance footage from hotel security later revealed both Diddy and Jamie slipping out, followed by one of Diddy's longtime security men, who carried a black briefcase. Inside the VIP suite, what was captured, accidentally, by a hot mic left on from the poker livestream, was barely audible. But one line, though muffled, came through clearly when enhanced by audio technicians years later during a hush-hush investigation. "We keep the circle tight. Always. You already know what's in that drive." What drive? According to a former IT specialist who once did freelance encryption work for one of Diddy's companies, there existed a digital safe key, a tiny device, no larger than a USB stick, containing encrypted files accessible only through biometric data. Rumors swirled that it housed audio, video, and documentation spanning decades of high-powered interactions, many of which, if leaked, would shatter reputations, contracts, and possibly lives. That night in Vegas, Diddy allegedly handed this safe key to Jamie. Why? Some believe it was a gesture of ultimate trust. Others say it was collateral. A symbol that Jamie was no longer just a member of the circle, he was the circle now. In the days following the event, Jamie's behavior shifted again, subtly, but noticeably. His team, usually open to media requests, began turning down interviews. Travel arrangements were locked behind NDAs. Even close friends noticed his increased reliance on private security. "He had guys with earpieces at lunch," said one actor friend. That wasn't Jamie. At least, not the Jamie I knew. Jamie also purchased a new property in Calabasas, a fortress-like estate with private gates, a panic room, and reinforced cell shielding. When a TMZ reporter asked him about the move, Jamie joked, "Gotta protect the vibes." But those in the know understood it was something deeper. Something more serious. Meanwhile, back in Vegas, strange things began happening. A hotel staffer who had assisted with the event was mysteriously let go. The freelance audio tech who discovered the hot mic recording vanished from the Vegas scene entirely. Online forums lit up with conspiracy threads about the circle and the Palms night, but none gained real traction before being mysteriously deleted or locked. Diddy, when asked during a later GQ profile about the Vegas tournament, simply said, "What happens in Vegas tends to echo for a long time." As for the digital safe key, it hasn't been seen since. But a hacker collective claimed in 2013 that Jamie's private security team had enhanced their cloud protocols to military-grade encryption. They even suggested that multiple decoy keys had been distributed to confuse any bad actors attempting to intercept the real one. Why would an entertainer need such protection? The answer was simple. One Reddit theorist claimed, Jamie wasn't just an entertainer anymore. He was a vault. That same year, Jamie launched two new ventures, a film production company with overseas funding and a tech incubator with undisclosed backers. Both were applauded publicly, but the source of their funding raised quiet eyebrows. Behind the scenes, tensions were reportedly rising. One former music exec hinted in an off-the-record interview that there was worry Jamie had too much knowledge, too much leverage. And yet, Diddy never showed concern. At least, not publicly. In fact, months after the Vegas night, Diddy posted a cryptic tweet that was later deleted. It read, "If you want to survive the storm, make sure the vault doesn't float." What did it mean? No one knows for sure. But those who remember the events of that night at the Palms say one thing with certainty. That was the moment Jamie went from being part of the Pact to holding it in his hands. And once you hold the truth, the game changes. Permanently. Mardi Gras 2013 was, as usual, a swirling kaleidoscope of beads, brass bands, and Bourbon Street chaos. But far from the parades and revelry, tucked behind the old brick facades of the French Quarter, something else was happening. Something secret, something tightly controlled. That year, a party was thrown that no one advertised. There were no invites on social media, no celebrity sightings outside. Yet, it would come to be known among certain circles as the masked party. The location was an old mansion in the Garden District, owned, curiously, by an anonymous trust that had purchased the property 2 months prior for cash. High wrought-iron fences wrapped around the estate. The only visible sign of activity was a fleet of blacked-out SUVs parked in the rear alley, their windows tinted so dark they seemed to absorb light. Jamie Foxx arrived first, slipping through a service entrance in a hooded sweatshirt and cap. Minutes later, Diddy entered through the front, escorted by 2 private security guards wearing earpieces and giving silent hand signals. Once inside, the guests were instructed to leave all devices in sealed lockers. In exchange, each received a black velvet mask, uniquely patterned but devoid of identity. No names were to be used that evening. Only first initials. No photography, no conversations louder than a whisper. Just music, opulence, and encrypted communication. Inside, the mansion had been completely transformed. The decor resembled a modern masquerade ball fused with elements of futurism. LED lights pulsed faintly through translucent walls. Projection-mapped ceilings shifted with slow-moving clouds and flashes of digital constellations. At the center of the main room stood a glowing white cube, later reported by a staffer as a data hub that allowed for encrypted exchanges during the event via biometric-locked tablets. Guests moved like ghosts, dancing and conversing in whispered fragments. The identities of some were obvious to those who knew the body language, the walk of a famous pop star, the voice of a European financier, but no one acknowledged anyone directly. That was the rule. No confirmation. Only implications. It was during this event that a tech billionaire, masked in white with a gold trim, was seen speaking closely with both Jamie and Diddy. The three stood near a column by the fireplace for over 30 minutes, according to leaked security logs. Though the content of the conversation is unknown, many believe it was tied to a joint investment that later materialized in a now-defunct AI music startup, an ambitious venture that collapsed under suspicious circumstances just 2 years later. But what thrust the masked party into underground fame wasn't the guest list or decor. It was the leak. Weeks later, an anonymous Reddit account posted a low-resolution, silent video. The clip showed about 30 seconds of the party's interior, the camera shakily panning across masked guests. At the center, the frame locked briefly on 2 men, identical black masks, one placing a hand on the other's shoulder. Freeze frames and amateur analysis would later identify the body types, stance, and clothing as Jamie Foxx and Diddy. The video was quickly taken down. The Reddit account vanished. But not before it was reposted and dissected by conspiracy channels across the internet. One tech-savvy user enhanced the lighting and cross-referenced wardrobe choices from earlier in the day, citing paparazzi photos of Diddy wearing a distinctive wristwatch hours before the party. That same watch could be seen flashing briefly in the clip. Within hours, cease-and-desist orders were issued to anyone hosting the footage. YouTube channels reporting on the video were hit with copyright claims from a third-party legal entity with no listed company affiliation. Twitter accounts sharing screen caps were suspended. Even file-sharing services began scrubbing the content on request. And yet, the damage had been done. The existence of the footage alone was proof that a rule had been broken. Someone had filmed inside. Someone wanted the world to see. But more than that, it sparked fresh questions. What exactly was being discussed during these encrypted gatherings? Why the elaborate secrecy? And most importantly, what were Diddy and Jamie protecting? An event staffer, later doxed and driven offline, claimed in a podcast that attendees were required to digitally sign a real-time NDA via biometric confirmation before stepping beyond the main foyer. The technology, he said, had been provided by a partner company based in the UAE. Once signed, the contract would allegedly self-terminate after 48 hours, unless a violation triggered legal alerts. If that's true, it would explain the urgency in scrubbing the leak. But it also hints at something more sinister, that this party was not a celebration, but a transaction. Insiders point to a shift in Jamie's behavior after the party. His interviews became tighter. He began working with fewer collaborators. He dropped out of several scheduled appearances with vague reasons: timing, scheduling, creative direction. But what was happening behind the scenes was more telling. His financials, once relatively transparent through his ventures, now moved behind holding companies, offshore trusts, and anonymous investments. Meanwhile, Diddy posted a cryptic Instagram story the week after the leak, a blurry photo of a burning mask with the words, "Nothing survives the light." Jamie said nothing. But eagle-eyed fans noted he unfollowed several prominent producers on Instagram and deleted a photo with a caption referencing the crew. For those in the know, this wasn't fallout from a party, it was damage control for a breach in the Pact. The masked party tapes became a kind of underground mythology, fuel for conspiracy theories, whisper networks, and speculative journalism. But those who tried to dig deeper found only locked doors, legal threats, and silence. To this day, no one knows who recorded that footage. No one knows how it got past the layers of security, encrypted Reuters, and facial recognition checkpoints. And perhaps most chilling of all, no one knows what else was recorded that night. But one thing is clear, for Jamie and Diddy, that 2013 masquerade wasn't just another night of luxury. It was a test. And someone, somewhere, failed. By 2017, the cracks in Diddy's empire were beginning to show. Rumors, once whispers confined to green rooms and backlots, were beginning to bleed into public discourse. Allegations surrounding his inner circle, ranging from financial misdealings to disturbing behavior at private events, surfaced in anonymous blogs and dark corners of Reddit. At first, they were dismissed as internet noise. But then, a name resurfaced that made the chatter harder to ignore. Kevin K.R.L. Sanders, a longtime associate of Diddy's, was arrested in connection with a human trafficking investigation involving underage recruits lured through music industry promises. Though Diddy himself was never directly named, the court documents made vague references to parties hosted by a high-level entertainment figure. The media knew who that meant. So did law enforcement. Then came the subpoenas. Several celebrities connected to Diddy's private events, either through social circles or business ventures, were called in quietly for questioning. Among them was Jamie Foxx. The timing couldn't have been worse. Foxx was in the middle of promoting a new film and launching a philanthropic initiative tied to music education. He was booked solid with interviews, red carpet appearances, and press conferences. Then, without warning, everything stopped. A scheduling conflict was the official line when Jamie cancelled his Good Morning America appearance. A travel issue was cited when he pulled out of the Grammys tribute event. But insiders knew better. Jamie had received a formal subpoena from a federal task force investigating the deeper network surrounding K.R.L. Though he wasn't a suspect, his presence at certain events, particularly the 2013 masked party and the 2010 Vegas summit, made him a person of interest. What followed was silence. Jamie disappeared from the public eye for 6 straight months. No interviews, no social media posts, no sightings. His team went dark. His assistants stopped responding to press requests. Even close friends reportedly couldn't reach him. The Jamie Foxx who once held court on talk shows and lit up red carpets had vanished without explanation. During this absence, Diddy made a rare public appearance on Instagram Live. He spoke in riddles and metaphors, addressing the noise in the media without ever naming it. But there was one line that stood out, chilling in its subtlety. Some people fold when the pressure hits. Others? They stay real when it matters. You know who you are. Those in the know believed that line was meant for Jamie. And for the first time in years, the Pact's strength was in question. Behind closed doors, Foxx was facing a choice: distance himself from Diddy and deny everything, or stay silent, as agreed, and risk his own reputation in the process. According to a source who once worked on Fox's security detail, the pressure was immense. Legal counsel advised cooperation. Publicists urged a soft distancing campaign, change up the friend group, be seen with new faces, make subtle changes in messaging. But Jamie refused. He reportedly said, "If I blink now, they'll know everything they need." What they referred to is unclear. Government investigators? The press? Or something less official, but far more powerful? By mid-2018, Jamie resurfaced. Carefully. Slowly. He appeared at a charity event for Hurricane Maria victims. No interviews, no speech. Just a quiet donation and a few photos. Then, in the fall, he returned to acting with a minor role in a Netflix drama, far from the blockbuster circuit he'd grown accustomed to. The comeback was calculated. But the shift in energy was obvious. Gone was the overt flash. His presence was more muted, guarded. Observers noticed he rarely traveled alone anymore and kept appearances brief, avoiding after-parties or media engagements. Even his longtime collaborators said his trust was harder to earn now. When asked by Vanity Fair about the long absence, Jamie smiled politely and replied, "Sometimes life tells you to sit still. And when it does, you listen." Behind that smile, though, was a man who had just survived a loyalty test unlike anything he had faced before. Diddy's troubles continued into the next year, with more legal battles and increasing scrutiny from watchdogs and industry insiders. But through it all, Jamie never spoke against him. Never released a statement. Never confirmed or denied anything. To this day, the public doesn't know what Jamie was asked during that quiet federal inquiry. What we do know is that no charges were filed. No further subpoenas came. And no leaks about his testimony ever hit the press. What did emerge, however, was a noticeable absence of certain people from Jamie's life. Collaborators he had once worked with closely were quietly removed from his creative circle. One producer, speaking anonymously, said he was told not to mention Vegas, Dubai, or the Garden District in Jamie's presence. He didn't get angry, the producer said. He just went quiet. And when a man like that goes quiet, you respect it. In 2019, Diddy posted another cryptic message, this time a quote card on Instagram. "Loyalty isn't spoken. It's proven." The caption? A simple fox emoji. There was no need to tag anyone. The fall may not have been Jamie's, but it tested every fiber of the pact he'd made over a decade ago. And when the moment came to protect himself or protect the circle, Jamie made his choice. He stayed real. When it mattered. The world had slowed to a crawl by 2020. The pandemic had grounded planes, closed borders, and emptied cities. But while global travel halted for most, a different class of movement persisted in shadows: charter flights, sealed convoys, and private islands never listed on TripAdvisor. In late July of that year, flight tracking enthusiasts on Twitter spotted an unusual route, a Gulfstream G650 jet departing Miami Executive Airport under a shell company tied to a known Diddy affiliate. The jet's flight path curved east before cutting south toward the Caribbean. Its destination? An unlisted airstrip on a remote island owned by a private equity group based in the Seychelles. 3 names surfaced on the leaked manifest: Sean Combs, Eric Bishop, Jamie Foxx's birth name, and 2 others whose identities remain redacted but were rumored to be a former intelligence contractor and a venture capitalist tied to offshore data infrastructure. The flight had no cabin crew listed and reportedly ran under sustained communication silence during the final leg of its journey. The island itself had a murky history. Once owned by a 1980s telecom magnate who vanished amid a tax scandal, the land had passed through a series of offshore trusts before being developed into a wellness retreat that was never open to the public. It featured 3 villas, a helipad, underground storage units, and a climate-controlled server vault buried beneath one of the hills. Blueprints leaked by a former contractor showed Faraday shielding around the facility, designed to prevent electronic signals from escaping. That weekend, the island's few neighbors, fishermen from nearby islets, reported strange activity. Boats with blacked-out windows docked at odd hours. Loud music echoed across the water well past midnight. And, most peculiarly, local radio frequencies were disrupted, as if something was blocking all signals within a 3-mile radius. Satellite images obtained by independent analysts later showed temporary structures erected near the shore, including what appeared to be an inflatable communications dome. By Monday, it was gone, along with the guests. But something had happened there. Something important. A source close to one of the private chefs flown in for the summit later revealed a few disturbing details. The guests operated on a strict schedule, meals at exact times, blacked-out hours where all staff were confined to quarters, and a ritual-like gathering every evening around a fire pit shaped in a perfect hexagon of stone. No phones. No laptops. Just conversations spoken low, and occasionally in code. The chef described Jamie Foxx as tense but composed. He didn't joke or sing like the Jamie everyone knew. Instead, he kept close to Diddy, only speaking in private and never lingering long in public spaces. There was no indication of celebration. No luxury spa sessions or casual relaxation. This wasn't a vacation, it was a summit. One meant for the preservation of something fragile, and possibly dying. Later that month, 2 leaks gave shape to what may have transpired on that island. The first was a heavily redacted document from a cybersecurity firm suggesting that biometric data had been uploaded to a secure satellite node within 24 hours of the guest's departure. The timing aligned with the island visit. Analysts speculated it was a form of digital vault transfer, possibly involving key holders in a long-standing agreement. The second was a voice memo, posted briefly to an anonymous SoundCloud account before being scrubbed. In the 11-second clip, a voice widely believed to be Jamie's says, "It's not just leverage anymore. It's insurance. And we all need to carry it." Though unverified, the clip spread rapidly across conspiracy channels and was paired with satellite overlays showing temporary tents and heat signatures consistent with underground server use. The theory? The island visit wasn't just a meeting, it was a migration. Of data. Of loyalty. Of control. 4 months after, Jamie disappeared once again. No social posts. No live events. Just pre-recorded interviews and digital-only appearances. Diddy, on the other hand, seemed more visible than ever, tweeting, live streaming, and launching a string of new business ventures that moved money faster than investigators could trace it. Some said he was creating smoke to hide something burning beneath the surface. By winter, Jamie quietly transferred majority control of several of his entertainment ventures into a Delaware-based holding company with no listed board members. The move raised questions, but no answers. In a rare sit-down interview with a podcast host, when asked about the pandemic's effect on his worldview, Jamie simply said, "Man, we all had to retreat and rethink what matters. Sometimes, that means cleaning house in ways people don't understand." He left it there. No elaboration. But to those following the trail, the island summit was more than a house cleaning. It was a recalibration of the Pact. A gathering of the remaining players who had been keeping the secret, whatever it was, alive for nearly 2 decades. The structures built on that island are now gone. Satellite imagery from early 2021 shows nothing but empty sand where once stood reinforced domes and temporary barricades. But the energy remains. According to the few who've visited since, there's a strange hum at the center of the island, a vibration beneath the earth that never stops. Whether that's real or imagined is irrelevant. What's undeniable is this: after that summit, Jamie Foxx was no longer just a vault. He had become a guardian. A last line of defense for a secret now older than most careers. And though the island was temporary, the message was permanent. There would be no second summit. Whatever decisions were made on that sand would stand. Forever. The leak hit the internet like a whispered scream. Low at first, barely noticed, then suddenly everywhere. A single tweet from a burner account. 1 minute ago. It's real. The pact was never broken. Attached was a 37-second audio clip. Grainy. Slightly distorted. But unmistakably real. The voice belonged to Jamie Foxx, calm but weighty, as if speaking to someone he'd known for decades. "We agreed to protect it, no matter the cost. And you know I never blinked." The internet exploded. Within minutes, the clip had been reposted across every platform: Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, Reddit, TikTok. Thousands of users began dissecting the waveform, comparing voice samples, decoding background noises. One user claimed to hear a faint metronome clicking in the background, possibly linked to one of Diddy's private studio setups. Despite the viral chaos, no one knew where the clip came from. The original post was deleted within 5 minutes. The account, wiped. But the internet never forgets. It wasn't just the content of the audio, it was the timing. Just hours earlier, a former assistant to Diddy, known only as Nia in legal documents, had posted and deleted a cryptic thread on X, formerly Twitter. "I saw it. The original agreement. Signed with no signatures, but the blood was real. 2002, Manhattan." She claimed to have seen the actual document, referred to in internal messages as the Pact. It wasn't a contract in the traditional sense. No legalese. No binding clauses. Just a handwritten page containing 4 lines. Silence secures survival. Protection is mutual and absolute. No exposure without unanimous consent. Break the circle, and the circle breaks you. The document was reportedly locked in a secure briefcase that traveled between properties via courier. She didn't say how she saw it, only that she had. Her thread went viral before it disappeared. Her account was then suspended. She hasn't been heard from since. What followed was a wave of online detective work unlike anything since the Panama Papers. Journalists, amateur sleuths, former assistants, and even ex-bodyguards began coming forward, some anonymously, some boldly. A consensus began to form. The so-called pact between Diddy and Jamie wasn't just a metaphor. It was real. And it had governed the moves of both men for over 2 decades. The evidence was compelling. Jamie's consistent silence during all of Diddy's scandals. Diddy's unwavering support of Jamie's ventures, even the unprofitable ones. The eerie disappearance of footage, photos, and witnesses from known events they both attended. And now, this clip, surfacing just minutes after the thread went live. The theory? The pact had been challenged. Perhaps even broken. And someone, somewhere, was trying to get ahead of the narrative. In a stunning coincidence, or perhaps not one at all, Diddy went live on Instagram just hours later. No music. No dance. Just a dim-lit room and a single sentence before logging off. Some debts get paid in silence. Jamie, for his part, didn't go live. But he did something louder. He commented Fox face lock on a completely unrelated photo, a fan art post about loyalty. It didn't take long for his followers to connect the dots. The Fox and the lock. Jamie Foxx. The vault. The silence. Later that day, 2 industry insiders confirmed to Rolling Stone that a major exposé had been in development for nearly a year, focused on the hidden alliances within Hollywood's inner elite. Jamie and Diddy were both central figures. The exposé had been mysteriously delayed multiple times. Sources now believe the delays were the result of behind-the-scenes legal pressure, and perhaps more. But this leak had changed everything. 1 minute was all it took. People began speculating that the audio clip had been deliberately released by someone inside the circle, possibly as a warning, possibly as a signal. The message? The pact still held. Jamie had never turned. He'd stayed loyal. Even when subpoenaed. Even when questioned. Even when Diddy's empire began to falter. In retrospect, everything began to look like a breadcrumb. The silence after Vegas. The guarded return post-2017. The private island summit. The carefully curated appearances. The strange legal moves behind his production companies. All of it now appeared not just as survival, but strategy. The pact, it seemed, wasn't about protecting secrets anymore. It was about maintaining power. Preserving a structure that had survived longer than most record labels, longer than many friendships, longer than empires. And now, in 2025, someone had tried to expose it. But the audio didn't unravel the bond, it reinforced it. Diddy's legal troubles continued, but Jamie remained untouched. He made no further comments. No clarifications. His team declined interviews. But fans noticed something peculiar. Jamie quietly began following accounts linked to data privacy, offshore banking, and 2 digital forensic analysts known for tracking high-profile leaks. The message was clear. He was watching. The pact wasn't dead. It had simply gone digital. And if that 37-second clip proved anything, it was this. Even after all the silence, all the buried weekends, all the erased footage and unspoken rules, Jamie Foxx had never blinked. 1 minute ago, the world got a glimpse. Now it could never look away.